Gary Reeves, who we have talked to once or twice in the past, harassed a little bit. He's one of those instructor guys who basically tells you what you ought to know, tells you where to go, and you better listen. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay.
It makes me sound much smarter than I am.
Well, you're a pilot. We can only do so much. Gary is doing some extraordinary work in specialization in a number of instruction disciplines, and God bless him for that, because quite frankly, some of the areas he's touching on are some of the things I keep reading about in accident reports each day. So we need the effort. However, I have just been informed, and it's a little dastardly, and we're not quite sure what to deal with on this, but Gary's going over to the dark side. He's playing with helicopters. Now, mind you, I'm a commercial helicopter pilot and CFI helicopter and all that stuff, but it's still the dark side for those of us who grew up with fixed wing. Gary, how dare you?
Well, the good news is I know nothing about flying helicopters. The only thing I know is that you hate it when I call them rudder pedals. And apparently, there's something called a Jesus nut that sounds really important.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, especially with any altitude, yes.
I don't know how to fly a helicopter. I don't know anything about helicopter systems. But for my specialty, I kind of think that's a strength, because I'm not limited to what I know will work or won't work.
Gotcha.
So, Jim, so generous with your time. GPS, the guy in the pink shirt's a nickname, but I'm kind of well known for being the expert. And I'm not smart, but I have more experience teaching autopilots, GPS, and traffic terrain systems than any other instructor on the planet, because it's been my full-time job for 21 years. I'm well known in the fixed wing world.
At least you have a real job versus us journalists who just fake it.
Well, yeah, but your job looks much harder than mine. I just get paid to teach
Boy,
people.
if I got you fooled, buddy.
Yeah. So pilots all around the world, and mostly the US, that add Garmin avionics or any of the big brands will buy my paid mastery level videos, or they hire me to do private 3-day trainings. But I found out something really interesting about helicopters, and you can help me. I've been hired by some very large fleets, the US Coast Guard.
I've heard of them.
Yes.
Yes.
The largest Part 135 helicopter tour operator in the country, Temsco Helicopters. I'm working with Houston PD. IFR,
those guys see some action.
Right? So IFR being in the clouds for fixed wing pilots is scary if you're not trained, but airplanes are essentially stable and you do it. What I found out about helicopters is you could be a 20,000 hour very high time helicopter pilot and never go into the clouds, at least on purpose. They don't even get their instrument rating a lot. So there's
let's face it, helicopter IFR was black magic until not too many years ago.
Oh yeah. So the challenge I've seen is helicopter companies are seeing the benefits of adding Garmin Autopilot's GPS. Genesis S-Tech, the Moog HeliSAS Autopilot. So they're seeing the benefits, but the NTSB came out with something really interesting. An aircraft that has GPS, traffic and terrain systems in an autopilot has fewer accidents than aircraft without them, but they have twice the fatality rate.
Okay.
So if you invest in adding GPS and autopilots, you'll have fewer accidents, but you're twice as likely to die. And they've started putting it in reports, and they're actually saying it now. This person, very high-time professional pilot, was killed, and we can find no proof of formal avionics training.
Bingo.
Especially in the helicopter world where accidental IMC is so deadly.
And the way we scud run day in, day out, it's a matter of time. The only thing that saves you is if it's an inadvertent quick encounter and on the other side it's clear.
Right.
And if it doesn't, you got problems, son.
And I think you can help me, and you can certainly explain to all the viewers. It's kind of a culture shift, because even if the companies, the big rescue companies or whatever, buy GPS and autopilots, the average helicopter pilot doesn't typically use them.
Yeah.
So when things go bad, they don't know how to use them correctly and quickly. That could save a lot of lives.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to give all the benefits of avionics with training to the rotorcraft people because
Well,
it could
you're
save a lot
filling
of
some
lives.
areas. The problem with the rotorcraft industry is that we were this very entrenched VFR, low level, scud running, don't get high enough to have a nosebleed kind of mentality, that we could fly in almost anything as long as we kind of kept an eye on the ground. And we know how that turned out sometimes.
Sure.
But the fact that we developed avionics and stability control systems and autopilot systems that allowed us to deal with serious IFR has been a shock. And, we jump into this stuff, it's equipped, and I know how to use this and I know how to use that, but I have no practical experience.
Well, and it's not like a fixed wing guy, if they're going to hire me for training, it's because they fly IFR on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get an instrument rating in a helicopter, you're probably not doing actual IFR approaches on a regular basis. So having all the technology, you never kind of get the advanced mastery training, which is true in fixed wing, but you're just not used to using it. And there's so many great things that could save lives, they just don't even know it's possible. So I was lucky enough to get to be asked to teach an emergency class at Verticon last week.
That had to be fun.
How to use your autopilot and GPS to survive inadvertent IMC and low altitude IFR emergencies. And I've got some great in-flight footage of in a Bell 507 with the Moog HeliSAS and a Garmin GTN and a Garmin display of doing a very quick, all at the same time, course reversal, VNAV descent, and back out. Which helicopter pilots were like, no, you don't do a bunch of things at once. But if you knew how to use the avionics.
Yeah.
I've got some in-flight footage with Houston PD and an MD500 of teaching them how to create a layer on ForeFlight that in IFR, if you also needed to land quickly, it would automatically pop up green dots where all the safe open fields are. I've got stuff from Temsco helicopters in Alaska using an Avidyne 550 and something called OBS to get out of accidental IMC in a mountain canyon and create a safe landing path. So the tools are there, but they're just not commonly used. And my challenge is, I could save a lot of lives. The avionics dealers and manufacturers can save a lot of lives. How do we get helicopter people to ask for something they don't know they need?
Well, we got to get the word out, obviously. But I'll tell you what, next time you do one of these things, I'd really like to sit in on something like this because
Would love to.
that, I got a fair amount of time in virtually, all kinds of stuff up and down the line, Blackhawks on down, and that's great. But to be perfectly honest, never enough time in the IFR environment to be really confident about it because most of that time's long past and stuff I was playing with, and most of my flight work was in flight tests, and that wasn't IFR, that was, how not to kill the helicopter.
Right.
But love to see what you're doing with it, but it also sounds like something that really needs to be put in front of the community because I don't want to tell you how many times I, again, start every morning looking at accident reports and how many of them are rotor. And some of them are just really stupid.
I mean, a classic example, a guy bought a very expensive helicopter from the factory, went through 5 days of factory training. How much of 5 days of factory or factory training equivalent is focused on the specific limitations, functions, and how the autopilot integrates with all the other avionics? I know they talk about that.
Yeah.
So 3 months after he bought it, he got into low clouds, trying to get home at night. The weather was worse than forecast.
Night is
Typical
worse.
thing. Tried to engage the autopilot 28 seconds before he died. It would never engage because the primary mode wasn't armed. So he pushed altitude hold and got a flight director, but it didn't do anything. 18 seconds before he died, he realized he needed to arm the primary SAS system and did that, but then didn't know you had to rearm the altitude. So the autopilot could have saved him, but there's nobody out there providing that depth of
it doesn't
training.
matter, rotor or fixed wing, people do not realize, and this goes all the way back to back to and long before the John Kennedy accident. hit autopilot and he'd have been fine. Just that moment of disorientation or not knowing what's going on or where the hell am I or whatever the case may be. And I knew John, and he was a lovely guy. But, and Hilo, same thing. We've got this capability. It's great. We paid big bucks for it. Have we been properly trained?
And that's the thing. Garmin makes amazing GPS and displays. Avidyne makes a wonderful FMS.
Ooh, love that.
Moog Genesis has a great helicopter autopilot.
Yeah.
But if you're buying the tools and not investing the 20 hours to learn them,
No.
they can't.
It's ridiculous.
They can't help you
No.
when you need them. And it's not that they're bad people. They just don't know what to ask. So, because I'm doing so much rotor work now, on my website, this is the total pitch, pilotsafety.org/rotor, ROTOR. I'm actually have a bunch of avionics examples of how I work with fleets, but I'm going to have that class I taught at Verticon, an hour and a half recorded with much better sound quality, up on that website for free.
Send me that link. I want to see that one.
And anybody can watch it for free. Because I'm like you. I want to save lives, and the best way to do it is to tell people the fixes. So I've always been very grateful for what you do, especially giving me some time, but it's sharing the news is what makes the difference.
Well, you've done a smart thing for a flight instructor. You took something that you're passionate about, you learned it better than anybody else, and you're teaching it the best way you know how. There are flight instructors from the community, and Rich Stoll on Unusual Attitudes. Best in the business, no question about it.
Great friend of mine, amazing.
It's a guy I actually sent Vicky to for aerobatic training back in the day, and she went on to become a almost world champion and everything
better
else.
than that.
She was amazing, and he is extraordinary. There are other people out there with specialties. There's a guy who does nothing but stall work and backward, and actually quite a few. And that's great. And this is the thing that we need to index and let people know that these are the skills they need to learn and go for it. And we have a project we're talking about in the future, developing an aviation merit badge system to take the very basic skill sets that we immediately forget up after the check ride, or are likely to get us into trouble, or that we don't understand. I mean, for gosh sakes, when I go out on a test flight with a quote-unquote chief pilot for an LSA manufacturer, and the winds are honking across the runway, and I slipped a landing, and he's looking at me like I'm from Mars. What was that? It's called a slip. He didn't know what it was. These are the things we need to be teaching, and find the best people in those areas, teach them individually, like you're doing, and pardon me, sermon over, but I had to say it. And Zach is smiling behind the camera here because he's hearing me. Yeah, I'm preaching again is what's going on here, and we'll give that a rest. Gary, tell everybody how they can get more information on you. This is your chance. If
you Google Gary, GPS guy in the pink shirt, you're going to find a lot of stuff on the internet that says I'm really smart.
Some of it's clean.
Don't believe any of it. But if you want to look at my free getting started videos on Garmin, Avidyne, autopilot stuff,
great stuff,
or any of the avionics training I do, just pilotsafety.org, or just look for him. I'm at the same convention. He's the good-looking one. I'm the guy in bright pink.
This is true. You can trust him.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 68th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Phoenix, Arizona, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.